This episode is brought to you by the Disney Plus Hulu Max bundle with plans starting at just $16.99 a month. Stream the latest seasons of The Last of Us on Max, Andor on Disney Plus, and the final season of The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu. All of these and more streaming soon. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle.com for more details.
This is the Long Island Report on 107.1 WLIR. Using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Good afternoon. This is the Long Island Report. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. Jesse Garcia is traveling today. So I'm honored and privileged to bring back to our listeners the one, the only, the original King and I, Congressman Peter King.
Thank you, Judge. Great to be here. It really is great to be back. I'll do a poor job of filling in for Jesse, who, by the way, is a good friend and one of the most successful political leaders in New York State at a time when political leaders are almost extinct. He and Joe Cairo and Nassau, I think, are the two best in the entire state, maybe the country.
Well, I think, and you know this, and you appreciate this, given your long and distinguished tenure as a member of the United States House of Representatives, but for Long Island, you would not have the control by the United States in the House of Representatives by the Republican Party.
Yeah, it was the seats on Long Island and also states like districts upstate, like slightly upstate, just north of the city, with
Mike Lawler
and Scott Molinaro. The fact is, one of the reasons they won, is there was so much money and effort put into Lee Zeldin's campaign, that propelled them really statewide. So not just Long Island, but also areas adjacent to the city also benefited from the really tremendous effort that came from Long Island. And I wish there was more of that in both parties, to be honest with you. I think we have more things getting done. My experience with political leaders, and you certainly had it in Brooklyn, I've had it in Nassau, is that, yeah, they can be partisan and they will fight and almost do anything to win an election. But once it's over, they also understand the need to negotiate, to get things done and sit down and don't take it personally.
Well, I reflect back on my youth, which was right after the War of 1812, Congressman, and
I know the feeling.
And when I was a kid, I was a page in the United States House of Representatives, and the collegiality between the two parties, people would sit down next to each other across the aisle. They'd work together to reach reasonable compromises that were in the country's interest and the public interest, and there was none of this name calling and ideological purity, and that's been lost. And your gift as a public servant has always been to work with other people and try to find common ground to protect and defend this country. So we were very, very lucky to have you in Congress. And long before you and I met and were co-hosting this show together or doing Cats at Night together, I told you, as a member of Congress, you were my hero. I thought you were the best.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you're certainly considering your background as a judge and also your political background through you and your father. But, I look back on it. If you want two examples to me, two different sets of situations where there was real partisanship and real cooperation. You had Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill was
exactly
one.
Right.
And one that you're very familiar with is Rudy Giuliani and Peter Vallone.
Absolutely. In fact, the documentary that we just did last week, it was the premiere and it's coming out. It's called Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York. It was a great documentary, and what it did is it pointed out how well Rudy Giuliani as mayor and Peter Vallone as Speaker of City Council worked together. In fact, one of the things we liked most about Rudy Giuliani, and he really was America's mayor, but when he got elected, he went down the hall with a couple of cups of coffee and a couple of bagels, walked down to the Speaker's office, sat down with Peter, and literally broke, I guess you can't say broke bread, you have broke bagels. They broke bagels. And they worked together, and they installed red phones on each of the desks. So the mayor had a red phone.
So it's two Italian-Americans eating Jewish food.
Of course. Well, I was the Jewish lawyer, and the late Denny Young was Giuliani's counsel. Well, and we always tried to work together. That's not to say we didn't have our disagreements. And when I first was appointed to the bench. The first judgeship I had was criminal court before I went to Supreme Court, but I was appointed by Giuliani. And Rudy said to me at the interview, he said, "Richard, tell me about your litigation experience." I said, "Other than the 20 cases I had against you, Mr. Mayor?" So it's a long-lost era, and it was a better era, and I'm deeply saddened. What I want to ask you about, because I watched the speakers fight with Kevin McCarthy very closely, and I had the opportunity to meet Kevin McCarthy when he was the minority leader. I saw him a number of times out on Long Island at the Southampton breakfast. I thought he was a very engaging, very smart fellow, very common sense, real student of history, and clearly he wanted this position. And there was this, what I consider as an outsider looking in, a fairly ugly fight for the speakership. You had some people who were principled in terms of what they were trying to accomplish. For example, having regular order rather than avoiding omnibus bills, which I understand. But you also had some people that were just posturing. And what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was really totally turned off by it. I mean, in the last, 150 years, this has only happened once before. And happened, I guess, in the 1850s and again in 1924, 25. But you have to go back to the 1850s to find one that went on for so long, so extensively, as far as the number of votes. And to me, it's you're talking about the Speaker being second in line to be President of the United States. It's an important position. Well, the tradition has been that both parties select their nominee for Speaker in a closed session. They can be heated, they can be hotly contested, but whoever wins that vote within the party, then the entire party unites behind that person to be Speaker. So really the only time there should be a genuinely contested vote should be within the party, because the Speaker is going to be the leader of the party and he's going to also head the Congress. And Kevin McCarthy won that vote by, I think it was 188 to 30 or something like that. So it wasn't even close. And yet you had 20 people, 20 people, who refused to vote for him on the House floor, basically holding the whole Congress hostage, because you have to get a majority, not of your party, and not even, you have to get a majority of those voting on the House floor that day. And so Kevin had to get 218 votes, and these 19 to 20 held back, so the most he could get was 198 or 199, 98, 199, 200. That's all he could hope for. And so they just basically held the whole country and the Congress hostage. And, the issues they raised, even like you mentioned about regular order, I'm for that, but that should also be decided within the party, or again, between the party leaders, not enough to hold up the election of the person second in line to be President of the United States. Well,
I was observing a congressman. I have to say, I thought that this was not a good thing for the Republican Party. I thought it was not a good thing for Kevin McCarthy. I'm hopeful that they can now get past this. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be a long-term cost to that fight?
It can be. I'm hoping that they get off to a better start. Actually, let me tell you, one good thing I've heard is that Hakeem Jeffries, who's a Democratic leader, I thought the speech he gave the night of the actual election when it finally happened, that his speech was too partisan for the moment. Having said that, my understanding is that personally, Kevin McCarthy and Hakeem Jeffries are talking. Kevin tells Hakeem, Kevin has told Hakeem the day before what he plans on doing. Like, for instance, even removing the people from the committees. That's going to be a partisan act. It's going to be, bitterly contested. But he told Hakeem he was going to do it. So it wasn't like catching people off guard. Now, unlike with Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, they never spoke. So at least you have this line of communication going on. But, we have the debt ceiling battle coming up. And the debt ceiling, we know it's going to have to be raised ultimately. But it can be negotiations to find some ways to control spending. And let's just say Kevin McCarthy is in with President Biden, and they have long, tough negotiations, and Kevin gets a number of concessions from the president. Okay, that to me is a victory, should be a victory for Kevin McCarthy. Of those 19 to 20, I think most of them are going to look at not at the concessions he got, but the concessions he didn't get. And anytime you're negotiating with the president who's in the opposite party and the Senate's controlled by the opposite party, any concessions you get are good. But they're going to. My concern is they're going to focus on what's not in that the final agreement and use that to try to bring Kevin McCarthy down. That's the worry.
I think you're right. I think there's an old adage which says, "Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good," right. And I think they're missing the point. And the more they weaken McCarthy, and the more they grandstand and embarrass the Republican Party in the House, they're embarrassing the Republican brand across the country. They're not serving the country well, and they're certainly not serving their party well.
Yeah, I think these guys they want to miss the point. I mean, they just want to show their power. I mean, listen, when I saw some of those 19 to 20 people, nobody pays any attention to them in Congress. These guys, they've never really achieved a lot. They're just considered to be guys sitting in the back talking. I mean, these are not heavyweights. We're not talking about a guy like a Henry Hyde or a Steny Hoyer or people like that. These are guys who, that was their moment in the sun, and they used it to really obstruct the election of the second, third most important person in the country, second in line to be the president. And to me, that was unforgivable. But now they've tasted it. I think they enjoy that 5 days of publicity, and I think they're going to try and get it back. One other example I can tell you, which happened when things were even less partisan than they are now, and still we had this breakdown. It was Barack Obama and John Boehner were negotiating the debt ceiling. And what they agreed on was, now Republicans can never raise taxes, Democrats can never affect Social Security. That's the rules of the party. But they had worked out an agreement between the two of them that the Republicans would allow certain tax cuts to expire. So we're not raising the taxes, we're letting tax cuts expire, which would have brought in additional revenue. The Democrats agreed, President Obama agreed, that Social Security in the future, there was going to be built-in age increases, which wouldn't affect anybody, I don't think, above the age of 40 or 45. They agreed on it, they shook hands. By the time they got back to their offices, you had right-wing radio denouncing it as a sellout to Obama because it was going to be a big tax increase, even though it wasn't. And you had Democrats yelling how senior citizens were going to be put out in the street. The whole deal fell apart, and both President Obama and John Boehner denied they ever made the deal. So that was then how tough it was. Imagine what it's going to be like today, whatever Biden and Kevin McCarthy work out.
Well, there's this whole culture of being a purist, which is very troubling because the whole art of the legislative process, as you know, I know from my days as general counsel in the New York City Council, as a member of the United States Congress and your experience out on Long Island, the whole gambit is to have a reasonable compromise that protects and defends the public, and it's not about posturing, and it's a reasonable accommodation. So you go in, you ask for a lot, but you know from the very, very beginning that you want to get to yes. As the book says about negotiation, you want to get to yes. Mm-hmm. And I think you're absolutely right, Congressman. I think what you're observing is getting to yes is not the point. Getting your 15 minutes of fame on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News is the game.
Or sending out quick fundraising requests. Vote for me, contribute to my campaign so I can save the country, that type thing. Yeah.
Well, wasn't Matt Gaetz out there when he was posturing and playing his games during this whole scenario? Was it 15 votes, whatever it was? Wasn't he out there making the phone calls, fundraising at the time?
You're not allowed to make fundraising calls, any type of fundraising on the floor of the House, so he would step right outside the door. I was told by people who were there, yeah.
I find that if you love this country the way you and I do, and if you really care about the future for our children, our grandchildren, we have to get our heads straight and understand what the real problems are, where the real threats are. This internal division that we have is very detrimental. The Chinese are eyeballing us. Mm-hmm. They see the internal divisions as weakness, and they're just waiting to make their moves. And people have predicted, and I hope I'm wrong, one of the military leaders of the country was just in the newspapers on this. I think he's from the Army. And one of the points he made was China is going to make a move against Taiwan during the presidential campaign season of 2024, because that's when we're going to be most divided, and that's when they're going to make their move.
And that could be a time when these remarks from people who call themselves America First, which is, to me, a bad name to use because that goes back to the 1930s.
Given the history with the racism, the anti-Semitism, and the crazy isolationists.
Right. Which, by the way, that group didn't collapse until Pearl Harbor. We had Pearl Harbor. One of the reasons we had Pearl Harbor was because of them. But no, I mean, right now it's saying, why are we sending money to Ukraine? We have people who are suffering here in the United States. Why defend Jordan's border instead of the Mexican border? Why fight with China over some small island like Taiwan? That kind of mentality, which is dangerous, if that sinks in, I can see why China would launch an attack during the presidential election.
Well, Kevin has given us a sign. You remember that sign.
Oh, so Kevin, I tell you.
Yeah, that Kevin.
I thought he was gone. Is he still here?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
Kevin's here. The universal and immortal Kevin. All right, we're going to take a break. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with Congressman Peter King. This is the Long Island Report. We'll be right back for more interesting conversation.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We are back. In the studio with me is my good friend, esteemed colleague, Congressman Peter King. You remember him, members of the audience, from the great show called The King and I. Peter, it's great to have you back on.
Great to be here, Judge.
It's wonderful to have you here. I want to focus on this, talking more about McCarthy's leadership of the House as the Speaker. He just did some things, and I want your comments on it. He just removed Schiff and Swalwell from the Intelligence Committee, and you were chair of Homeland Security, and you're also on the Intelligence Committee.
Right.
And then he also is taking Omar, or proposes to take Omar off foreign relations, right? And he gave Santos a couple of appointments, but now Santos is backstepping and says he'll accuse himself. I want to get your thoughts on those moves.
First of all, I'm glad Santos is not on the committees. I understand Kevin needs Santos's vote in the short term, but that is going to hurt the Republican Party so badly. Certainly on Long Island, we have local elections coming up next year, and the only political issue people are talking about now is George Santos, which is terrible. So I think the sooner he leaves, the better. But I think Kevin felt he had to appoint him to the committees. But also we see this week that Santos stepped down from the committees temporarily. He says he's doing it voluntarily. I think that was done. I think Kevin McCarthy certainly pressured him or persuaded him to do that. As far as the others, in the past, I would have said it's not good to keep people off committees. Let each party decide who's going to be on the committees. But Nancy Pelosi broke that last year when she set up the January 6th committee, and she would not allow Kevin McCarthy's selections to be on the committee because basically they didn't agree with her prearranged ending or conclusion of the committee. She
had a narrative going into that committee.
And to me, the whole time I was in Congress, I mean, I when I was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, I had some Democrats on there that drove me crazy. I mean, they disagreed with me on everything. It never entered my mind that I could have them removed from the committee or anything. So this is something that has not been done in the past. But let's take them one by one. On the Intelligence Committee with Schiff, he was actually a fairly moderate Democrat. And then I guess it was in 2016 when he heard that early 2017 when he heard that Dianne Feinstein may not run for re-election in 2018. He made such a left-hand turn. He went so far to the left, became totally partisan. I saw what he did during the so-called Russia hearings, and we would hear testimony which added up to nothing, and he'd be all over CNN 10 minutes later saying, you wouldn't believe what we heard. We have conclusive evidence of collusion. And so he, to me, so offensive what he did.
And divisive for this country.
Absolutely. And also hurting us with overseas partners. To hear this, that you had the chairman of the Homeland Security, of the Intelligence Committee, saying that the President of the United States had colluded with Russia when he had no evidence for it. So I think Kevin is justified because it's a select committee. The Intelligence Committee is different from the others, and the Speaker has control over it. The custom has always been to let each party put their own people on. But Kevin, I think, has not just the right, but the duty in this case to step in with Adam Schiff. Now,
what about
Swalwell? Swalwell is even worse. I mean, Swalwell, first of all, he was having an affair with a Chinese spy. That alone, which maybe doesn't make him a bad person, but you talk about raising clouds or doubts about a person. I mean, I don't see how you could be approved for a job with the FBI or the CIA if you were known in recent years to have had an affair with a woman who was a Chinese spy. I mean, why did she single Eric Swalwell out to have an affair with? Certainly not. It's not his charm or his good looks. So,
and by the way, there are stories that there's dark money that came from Chinese interests in his campaigns.
That could well be. And Swalwell also was irresponsible. And I saw, the way he conducted himself. And again, I saw it because these were sensitive hearings. There were no TV cameras. There was nothing. So I saw the way Swalwell would really harass and abuse witnesses, trying to get them to say something that they didn't mean about Russian collusion. So no, Swalwell, to me, to maintain the integrity of that committee, I think that Kevin McCarthy has done the right thing in taking Schiff and Swalwell off. Now, as far as Eli and Omar, first of all, she and I basically never spoke to each other. She took long-distance shots at me. She was saying, a good riddance, bad rubbish. She was saying, when I decided to announce I was resigning, I had absolutely no use for her. She was very angry at me because I had done investigations of Islamic radicalism in this country. She is from Somalia. She's the worst, most notorious anti-Semite in the House of Representatives. She's absolutely, to me, it's a disgrace to have her in the Foreign Affairs Committee. It's not just that she's anti-Israel. She's anti-Israel in an anti-Semitic sense of the word. And Kevin, I think I understand why he wants her off the Foreign Affairs Committee, but he can't do that unilaterally. That has to be a vote of the full House.
Is he going to lose Republicans? I already saw at least one Republican says he's not going to support McCarthy.
Yeah, and Matt Gaetz was actually threatening for a while not to do it. But that's Matt Gaetz. I think hopefully he's going to vote the right way for once. But he can only afford to lose 4 votes on this. And there was already 1 or 2. There was Nancy Mace from South Carolina. There was also a woman from Indiana. And then you had Gaetz and a few others who think it's a bad precedent to set. Ordinarily, I would say it is. But again, based on what Pelosi did the last time, and also in this case, because Omar is so notoriously anti-Semitic, you should not have people. It's bad enough whatever people's private views are. To me, have an open anti-Semite and an open racist on the committee, to me, is indefensible. So I think that it's doing the right thing. Also, it sends a message to the world that we're not abandoning our ally Israel.
Let me switch gears. The tragedy that just occurred in Memphis, where 5 black police officers confronted a motorist and allegedly beat him to death, even though they were wearing body cameras. And all of a sudden, the narrative becomes that this is from the far left, that somehow this is an example of white supremacy. What do you think about that, Peter? It's
totally wrong, and it's dangerous, and it's just going to worsen relations between the races. First of all, obviously what those 5 police officers did was wrong. It's indefensible. And they've already, within a matter of weeks, been fired, indicted, and arrested. So, I mean, this is justice is being done. Now, let's go back, though. That to me, first of all, is not racist. And the 5 officers are all black. The police commissioner is black. The department is majority black. Also, we should keep in mind that Memphis has an incredibly high murder rate. They already had 350 murders this year. New York has about 480, I think, and we're 13 times larger. So their murder rate is like off the charts. It's terrible. It's a very dangerous city. Now, to say first, some are still saying it's racism. It's not racist. Then they went to the term police culture. It's a culture of police. This is like one incident. There are millions and millions and millions of encounters every year between the police and the community. And you have something like this stands out. they bring it out as if somehow that indicts the entire police community. Think of all the lawyers who have been disbarred, doctors who are guilty of malpractice, accountants who are stealing money, stockbrokers who are involved in swindles. We don't say it reflects the culture of those professions. And yet cops who are the most dangerous job, who are out there. You figure there's 800,000 cops in this country. They all have guns. They all can use physical force in certain cases. And yet you have this minimal number of violent cases. And also the other one is when it comes to somehow this racism issue, every year there are more whites than blacks killed by cops, both in terms of total population and also in the percentage of crimes committed. African Americans commit more than 52, I think 50, well over 50% of the violent crimes in the country, and yet more whites than blacks are shot when it comes to encounters. Now, just because someone's shot doesn't mean it's wrong, but to say that somehow this shows racism, if anyone, whites can claim that they're being disproportionately shot. So, no, this is in New York, I think. The last time they kept numbers before George Floyd, there were 25 times police used their guns in New York. In that, I guess it was the year 2019 and 2020. 2019, I think it was 35 times they were used. Only 25, though, involved others. Others actually were police suicides. There's 25 times the police used their guns. A majority of times it was used against whites rather than blacks. And that's out of how many millions and millions of encounters that the 36,000 cops have with people every year.
First of all, I agree with you. This was not racism. It was bad policing.
Yep.
And the question becomes, you had some hard guy cops who were part of a group that were meant to target hard cases out on the street. They're really dangerous criminals. And there's a real question about their training and how they were dispatched. They shouldn't be involved in the ordinary traffic spot. It's if a taillight is out, they should just leave it alone. That's not what they're there for.
No, this was definitely bad policing. There's no doubt about it.
It's bad policing. But let's be very clear. If you don't have the police, you don't have law and order. If you don't have law and order, you don't have public safety. If you don't have public safety, you don't have civilization. If you don't protect the innocent public, government has no moral legitimacy to govern. These are all basic truths. I don't know why people have such a hard time with it. And who are the biggest victims? The biggest victims of lawlessness and the lack of public safety are the black and brown communities. Right. And the result of the George Floyd situation, whatever you think about the George Floyd situation, is as follows. It became a disincentive for cops to go out and do their jobs. It's easier for them to drive by, walk by, not get involved in a confrontation. And then you have this phenomena where they want to take away qualified immunity from police officers. Mm-hmm. Well, when you make them exposed, not just to criminal charges, but the fact that they can be individually sued and their assets, their homes, their pensions can be lost, what you have is a problem of recruitment and retention. And that's exactly what you're having. It's becoming harder and harder to get the best and the brightest in law enforcement. And the seasoned people who you want, the experienced ones you want, are leaving because they don't want to work in this atmosphere. Then you wonder why you have this cycle of violence and disintegration. If you take a look at Jason Riley, who's a black journalist, writes for the Wall Street Journal, and often a talking head on Fox, he said the same thing in a recent column. He said, look, who's paying the price? What's the real proximate cause of this price being paid by the black and brown communities? You're not going to get the best and the brightest in uniform. You're not going to retain them. Let's focus on teaching people how to do the job well. And the last thing, Peter, and I want your comment on this from my perspective, the last thing you want to do is have Biden administration send the Justice Department in to take over all the police departments. What do you think about that?
First of all, that would be the worst possible thing of all. And secondly, and probably mainly, the cops do their job. We're talking about such a small percentage. And correct that. I mean, obviously, there should have been a supervising officer on the scene down in Memphis. That was a mistake of training or a mistake from the commissioner. I don't know why, because cops get involved in adrenaline, things get out of hand, and you have to have someone there with a clear mind at all times. They didn't. And that to me, but you don't take that one case and think of the other millions and millions of encounters that the police have every year and the 800,000 cops that are in the country. And you mentioned George Floyd. Since George Floyd, obviously the murder rate has gone up, the violent crime rate has gone up, and the overwhelming number of victims of that is the African-American community, the minority community. They're the ones who are being affected the most. So in the so-called interest of saving black lives, more black lives are being lost, and it goes unreported. I mean, if obviously what happened to Memphis is wrong. Right, focus on it. That was one black person who was killed. It's terrible. But there's already been 350 other black people killed in Memphis, and you don't hear a word about it. And that's the reason why the commissioner, the police chief, set up this special unit. For the most part, I think it had a good record. What happened here, they were out of control. Changes had to be made. But if they start doing away with all these special units, the same thing happened in New York. I mean, in 2020, during George Floyd, they abolished the gun unit. And now I give Keyshawn Sewell and Eric Adams credit. They brought it back. And you have to have it to get guns off the street. People are so interested in gun control, so interested in violent crime. And the way you can do the most to stop violent crime is to get both the guns and the bad guys off the street is by having these special units to go out and know how to target people who have guns.
Absolutely right. We're going to take a break. Kevin has given us the sign. This is the Long Island Report with Congressman Peter King. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. We're back. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg with my good friend, esteemed colleague, the king of the king and I, Congressman Peter King. Peter, we're back once again. It's the summer of 2020, revisited, and you have cities burning, you have rioting going on, you have rioting and shakedowns and intimidation by Antifa and the Black Lives Matter types. And the reporters are saying these are mostly peaceful demonstrations. I love that term of what? Mostly peaceful demonstration. What think you?
Yeah, we saw that in 2020. They're talking about these mostly peaceful demonstrations when it was basically like a war going on every night in New York City. Buildings being burned, people being attacked, cops having Molotov cocktails thrown at them. I know one cop was hit in the face with a brick, lost all his front teeth. The next day, Andrew Cuomo was on the street saying he's proud to stand with the protesters. And then we had the district attorney, who I had always had a great respect for, Cy Vance, refusing to prosecute people who were arrested during these, I call them riots, people vandalizing St. Patrick's Cathedral, Macy's, not just the big bodegas in the minority communities, all these being attacked, restaurants being burned, and he refused to prosecute them. And you had, I remember talking to cops who were involved those nights. These, first of all, they were not any type of spontaneous demonstration. These were organized. I would say Black Lives Matter was definitely involved, but the ones coordinating it, I think, were Antifa. These people had radio communications. They were going up one street, down another. It was all planned. It was like a battle attack.
Well, they come in trucks with all kinds of equipment. They come in with bricks. They come in with clubs. They come in with Molotov cocktails. They come from out of state. Mm-hmm. They have no connection. The one thing that we should have learned was that this is an organized domestic terrorist operation. The question becomes, who is funding this and why? Because there's no benefit to the people of the United States by having a breakdown of civilization.
And there's certainly no benefit to the people living in the inner cities when it's the inner cities that are being attacked to a large extent and burned. I always remember, and you and I have discussed it, I guess it was a CNN reporter who was talking about a mostly peaceful demonstration, and behind him you saw police cars in flames, buildings in flames, and he was mostly peaceful.
Just, it's the old expression, who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes, or right. It's just me or your lying eyes.
But I think it should be fully investigated. Again, when they talk about white nationalism and everything, listen, I'm all for stopping that, whatever has to be done there. But if you talk about investigating the funding for Antifa or Black Lives Matter, right away you're called a bigot, a white nationalist, or a racist. And they're the ones who have caused more damage and more trouble. As bad as January 6th was, that was 3 or 4 hours in one day. That whole summer of 2020 where we had Seattle and Portland, New York City, Washington, D.C., all under siege the whole time. Yes.
Baltimore, wherever, Minneapolis, wherever you went, wherever you turn on, if they would show the film, every city of major import. And by the way, what do they all have in common? What do all these cities have in common?
Well, Democratic mayors.
Democratic mayors, and a large number of them had Democratic and minority mayors,
right,
and police commissioners and city councils. I mean, so give me a break. Let's talk honestly about this. You cannot tolerate domestic terrorists like Antifa. You cannot tolerate shakedown operations like Black Lives Matter. Where did all that money go? All these big corporations played this shakedown money. It was a shakedown operation. Where's the accountability? Where's the accounting? Where's the money? Well, one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter, how many homes does she have? 3, 4, 5 homes?
So these people are definitely living like millionaires and billionaires. And also, to me, I've been so disappointed in corporate America, the way they backed down immediately, like with the vote in Georgia, which to me did more to bring about fair elections than anything. And yet the All-Star game was moved out of there. Large corporations like Coca-Cola started boycotting Atlanta. And I think Joe Biden compared it to Jim Crow on steroids. And the fact is, more people voted. The most recent poll that was taken in Georgia was like 76% of the people said the election was the most fair they've seen, and 0% said they felt harassed or intimidated.
Oh, and if you compared, by the way, the election laws, the voting laws in Delaware,
or New York, for that matter,
to Georgia, Georgia wins in terms of openness and ease of doing that. So Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, former mayor of Newark, was ranting and raving about this. He had a Spartacus moment, whatever that meant. He had a Spartacus moment. Well, you should take a real good look at what goes on in New Jersey as opposed to what goes on in Georgia.
Yeah, he's another disappointment. When he was a mayor, he was much more conservative, much more into charter schools, parent control in the schools. He was considered like a new type Democrat. And now he's in Washington. He's down the line, left-wing progressive.
Well, that's the trouble, because the fringes of the party, the extreme fringe of the right and the Republican Party, extreme fringe of the left, seem to dominate the discussion, the narrative, the control. And the dirty little secret is that there's a funding for this. I said this when this began years ago. I said, forget about winning the city councils or the state legislatures. They're focusing on winning the county prosecutors, the city district attorneys. Right. And look at the harm that's been done by having these so-called progressives with all their ridiculous pieces of legislation and the harm that's been done. I submit to you that what's been done by the New York City Council and the New York State Legislature with their progressive left-wing agendas on so-called criminal justice are destroying the city and state of New York. What say you?
I agree completely. I know, talking to Bill Bratton, he said that no matter how bad it got in New York in the dark old days of the 80s and 90s, people knew the city council was always going to be with the police. The district attorneys would always be with the police. Now the city council is anti-cop. The district attorneys are anti-cop. And obviously the governor of the state legislature is totally anti-police, and they tie the hands of the cops. So, but you're right, Soros, the money that he put in to elect people like Alvin Bragg, the DAs in California, I guess L.A. and San Francisco and Philadelphia, we get down the line. These are the most rabid progressives you can imagine. And it seems as if the worse it gets, the more these people stay together. I'm talking about the progressives. They dig in more and more, like up at the state legislature. Here's Eric Adams, an African-American mayor who is saying that his communities, the minority communities that he feels he comes from, and rightly so, they're the ones being hurt the most. And he goes to Albany, and again, you have 2 African-Americans there in the Assembly and the Senate, and they basically close the door on him. He asks for changes to bail reform, to stop tying the hands of the cops. And they lock in with the progressives, and they basically send Adams home. They don't do anything. Governor Hochul says she's going to have some bail reform. She has the most cosmetic type changes of all. So, no, these progressives dig in, and you have Eric Adams and Keyshawn Sewell, who was a great commissioner, getting their hands tied because of Albany and then the city council.
And it's not a coincidence, Peter, that you had 484,000 people left New York State in the last couple of years. It just doesn't happen. New York is losing the most productive people to other states, particularly the South and Florida, the way California is losing people to Texas.
Well, the number I saw the other day in a story which surprised me, it was in the New York Times, that in the last 10 years, 200,000 African Americans have left New York City to go back down south. And there's only, I think it was 19% of the young black people under the age of 20, I guess, moving out. I mean, it's just so, these numbers, and ironically, they're moving down south, which is where
that's where they supposedly fled from.
Yeah, because the racial conditions down there, but they can't stay in New York anymore. They're moving out. So, the big money people are moving out, which takes away the revenue. The African Americans who need the assistance of the city and the police, they're moving out. So we're going to have, who's going to be left? I mean, I hate to be an alarmist, but basically you're getting all ends of the spectrum, all parts of the spectrum, having enough in New York City and New York State, but especially New York City.
Well, if you've devoted your life like you have and I have to public service, and you have a great love for the city and, in your case, Long Island and the state, you look at this and you just can't believe it's happening. And what's troubling to me, Peter, is it seems to have happened so quickly. The momentum is awful.
Bill Bratton, I'm not giving away anything confidential, he said that he always knew there was a chance that the city would turn around the wrong way, but he never thought it would collapse so quickly. I mean, this is really, since 1920, 2020, so bail reform in 2019, then George Floyd in 2020, just the collapse has been incredible. And then you have the economic issue with all the taxes and regulations, how impossible it is, for businesses to function here in New York. And the incredible high tax rates, which somehow makes people feel good. They're taxing the rich. You and I aren't among the rich, but they're taxing the rich. Well, that's where so much of the revenue comes from. We're driving the revenue out of New York.
Well, you like the hospital system in New York? It's one of the best in the world. Well, who do you think funds the hospitals? You like going to the museums and the cultural institutions? Who do you think funds those?
Right.
The charitable organizations, the not-for-profit, who help other people, who do you think funds that? So when you drive out your tax base and the productive people who pay the taxes, who create jobs, who spirit the economy forward, pretty soon, as Margaret Thatcher said famously, you run out of other people's money, and people will flee. Who's going to pay for all these social programs?
No, it's getting worse by the day, and I'm not a down person, but I tell you, it's been really rough the last couple of years.
I am by nature an optimist, and I've worked like you the better part of my life to preserve and protect this city and the state, and I'm deeply troubled by the direction we're going, and we need to have a turnaround, and we need it right now.
Right.
We have to take a break. We'll be right back. This is the Long Island Report with Judge Richard Weinberg and Congressman Peter King. Stay tuned for our final segment.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
It's the Long Island Report, using common sense, talking Long Island issues. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia on 107.1 WLIR.
This is the Long Island Report. This is Judge Richard Weinberg with my good friend, the king of the King and I, Congressman Peter King. This is our last segment for this week. Peter, I want to talk to you about the Putin war against the Ukraine. I have very strong feelings about this, and I want to get your thoughts as well. My view about the way the Biden administration has been handling this from the very beginning, too little and too late and half-hearted, and he was kind of dragged along. He's trying to take some credit. And I think this is a turning point, not just for the future of Ukraine, but for the future of Europe and for the future of the United States. I think this is a war that has to be won by the Ukrainians. What say you?
Yes, I fully support Ukraine. I fully support the effort by Ukraine against Russia, resisting Russian aggression, and really on all counts. One, from the humanitarian, from the moral. The fact is Ukraine is right, Russia is wrong, Russia is evil on this, Putin is an evil person. And also from the very practical sense of defense. This is in America's national interest. It's in Europe's national interest. It's in the world's national interest to stop Russia from becoming an expansion state. If they should prevail in Ukraine, I mean, I think you and I would agree that you're going to find Germany and France and these other countries now falling under the Russian sphere of influence as far as
What about
economic.
the Baltic states? What about Poland?
Right.
They're right next to Poland.
But they wouldn't be cooperating. They would be there unwillingly. I think Germany and others would give in to Russia because of the energy issue. No, I think Baltic states will be only a matter of time. Poland and other countries, I mean, Hungary I'm a little skeptical of right now, but certainly Poland. I mean, they lived under Soviet oppression for all those years. They know what it's going to be all about. And also China sees this. And let's face it, China and Iran are also assisting Russia in this. They see what's happening. I don't think, and not to divert, I don't know if China would be even making noises about attacking Taiwan if they hadn't seen what happened in Afghanistan.
I think that's exactly right.
And I don't think Putin would have gone in to Ukraine if he didn't see what we did in Afghanistan. So I give President Biden credit for standing up for I'm going to keep the coalition together. But when it comes to weapons, we're always reluctant to give them. And by the time we give them, it gives. By then, Russia has the upper hand. I think what Ukraine has done, what Zelensky has done, these are world heroes. I support Ukraine from the start. I didn't see this war lasting more than 2 or 3 weeks. I didn't see how they could possibly.
Oh, you remember Biden said he wanted to give him a plane out of the country?
He said give me guns instead.
That's right, and good for him, and he was right.
I guess it was after about a week or so of the war when Zelensky suddenly appeared, I guess in some street in Kyiv. We couldn't believe it. I mean, everybody thought he'd either be dead or out of the country or in hiding somewhere, and instead he was rallying the people of his own country. That was Churchillian. And yet when I find people, certainly including in my party, Republican Party, who somehow they want to attack Zelensky, they want to criticize Ukraine, they want to make apologies for Russia. I don't know what their history of America or the history of the Republican Party is. I mean, you think of people like Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, both Bushes, everyone stood up as Republicans. We stood up to Russia. So, quite frankly, to most Democrats over the years. But I think the weakness over the years did come from left-wing Democrats. Now, a lot of the weakness is coming from right-wing Republicans, which is insane.
Well, I'm a pretty regular viewer of news, and particularly, admittedly, of Fox. And I've generally liked Tucker Carlson a great deal. I probably agree with Carlson 70% of the time on certain issues. But do I think he's got this so dead wrong? He's always attacking Zelensky. He's always attacking Ukrainians. He sounds almost like an apologist for Russian adventurism. I don't get it. I don't understand what do they expect them to do? Just roll over and give them the country?
Yeah, and I just find, being, first of all, now the big thing with people like Matt Gaetz and others is that we have to account for the money given to Zelensky. Of course we do. We always do. I mean, is there going to be some corruption? There may be. During World War II, Harry Truman made his name investigating U.S. corruption during the war. But the fact is that this is a war that's 99% the right thing is being done by Ukraine. Ukraine is the victim here. And for us to try to find things to pick apart with Ukraine and giving Putin a free hand, to me, is just totally inexcusable.
Well, the problem is that it's easy to sit back and say it's not our problem.
Right.
But the lesson of history is when you have this kind of adventurism, this kind of agenda for world domination, ultimately it does become our problem. The United States cannot walk away from this. You need to have the Pax Americana, because without the Pax Americana, you cannot rely on Italy and France and Germany to maintain this. Which, by the way, I'll tell you what I find very troubling, Peter. Turkey. How come Turkey gets veto power of whether Finland and Sweden can join NATO? If Turkey doesn't want them in there, why doesn't Turkey get the hell out of NATO? Do we need Turkey in NATO? Is that what's so important?
No, we don't. We did at one time. They were a vital country between East and West, and they were a Muslim country, which is a very moderate. They're very anti-communist. But now, under Erdogan, it's gone so far the other way. And here you have Sweden and Finland, who literally are on death's doorstep as far as being so close to Russia. And the fact that they, Sweden especially, Sweden has been neutral forever. Finland has basically tried to have it, try to protect themselves. They've actually fought against Russia, but they are right at the Russian border there. And for them to want to join NATO is such an expression of support for the Western alliance. And then you have Turkey, which is the least Western of all the countries in it, turning it down. We have to find a way to make sure that Sweden and Finland are brought in, and if not, set up separate security agreements with them. It's so important to have them with us in this struggle. And at a time when we should be trying to get as much support, you have Turkey trying to divide us. I think we have to be more openly aggressive against Turkey and denouncing them for what they do and find ways to retaliate against them.
No, I think Turkey is a very, very dangerous player. You have what I call, and other people have called, this axis of evil going on. You have Russia, you have China, you have Iran. Okay? But then you have people like the Turkish regime playing this game. Then you have, and very disappointing to me, you have India, which is supposed to be one of the largest democracies in the world. Yeah. They're playing that game too. And when you look at the world stage, you see the Chinese are moving in and the Iranians are moving in. They're moving into to Latin America. Whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine?
Monroe Doctrine, you said before, Pax Americana. People say that the U.S. is too involved. Well, U.S. has been basically the dominant power in the world since 1945. During that time, there has not been a major war. You go back prior to that, there were wars every 20 years, really major wars, World War I, World War II. Go back to all the Crimean Wars and all those wars in Europe in the 19th century. The United States has maintained a world structure. It's done a great sacrifice, but it's in the world's interest and it's also in our interest. And when people talk about us spending all this money overseas that we should spend here, it's not going to do any good to be saving the money to spend here if we don't have a country left. And if we you mentioned China, they're expanding everywhere. They're all through Central and South America, business-wise, economy-wise. Same in Europe and Africa. They're there. They have this tremendous movement they're making. They're building up the Navy, building up their military, building up their Air Force. And so we should be more alert and say we have people who want to retrench and somehow make believe this isn't happening.
Well, what's very disturbing is as follows. There is a war going on right now against the United States, and it's emanating from China. And they've done it by stealing the technology, subverting our universities, buying off our elected officials. They've been buying off the intelligentsia. They have a whole game plan on this. But now, added to that is the open borders from the Biden administration, where you have the Secretary of Homeland Security, too bad you're not still in Congress, grilling this character, saying the border is closed. The border is closed. It's not an open border.
Right.
I mean, how does he get up there and say that kind of ridiculousness when you have 250,000 people a month flowing through? I don't know, was it 3, 4, $5 million people have already fled through?
And that's where the fentanyl is coming, which is killing more people in the last 3 wars we've been involved in and killed every year by fentanyl. You have the drug issue, you have the crime issue, and basically Joe Biden has invited these people across the border. Mayorkas and Homeland Security is
he
not
said,
doing
"Come on
enough.
down."
Yeah, basically,
he said, "Come on down."
Yeah.
Look, we're all for immigration. Immigration is a wonderful thing. We're all children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren of immigrants. But you have to have an orderly, legal, legitimate process. You can't have people jumping the border, coming in here illegally. There's a great column by Michael Goodwin of the New York Post, his most recent column.
All his columns are great.
I know, Michael. I read Andy McCarthy as well. Yeah, I keep reading them. I say thank you because I worry about my sanity. Miranda Devine is another one.
Right.
But I read these columns and I say, of course, you have to protect the border. So they're bringing these people into New York. Now they don't like their accommodation, so they're making demands. So they've learned entitlement. They've already become American because they're now entitled to everything.
The woke progressives do 2 things. One, they say we're a racist country because we don't let immigrants in, and we're just horribly repressive, and they want open immigration. Well, the fact is, if we're so bad, why do so many immigrants want to come here? I mean, I don't see people flocking into Russia or China or Venezuela.
Or Iran. You see a lot of people run into Iran, right?
So, I mean, this is We are still the greatest. We are by far the greatest country in the world. But we're going to be losing that edge if we just keep going down this path of disunity and weakness, self-flagellation. You go down the whole line, and also just breaking down traditional standards. You're right. You have people entering the country illegally, being put up in hotels that your ancestors couldn't imagine living in when they came here. They're getting 3 meals a day, showers. They're getting passes. They're getting free subway tokens.
They're getting cell phones.
Yeah, and they're bitching that they have to. That, it's not good enough for them. They don't like the food.
Well, Congressman King, it's been once again an honor and a privilege to share the mic with you. Your wisdom, your experience, your patriotism is an inspiration to us all. This has been the Long Island Report. Judge Richard Weinberg and my hero, Congressman Peter King, signing off for this week. We hope you and your family stay safe and well.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you.